Greetings, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for coming down or up to San Francisco. Hopefully, we have some locals in the audience, but also some people who are coming in from out of town. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Paige. I lead our DevRel team at Google DeepMind. And today, I am going to be talking a little bit about kind of the future of what software engineering and what automation might look like. There will also be a little bit of kind of like a timeline history, but hopefully this will be interesting or kind of thought-provoking for folks in the audience. And this is the first time that I'm giving this presentation. Usually I just do live demos the entire time. I think this is the most slides that I've presented in like the last 5 years. So we'll see a few slides, and then we'll see a demo to kind of express some of the ideas that were encapsulated in the presentation. So again, my name is Paige. I've been doing machine learning for a long time. I work on our Gemini models, so Gemini APIs, AI Studio, anti-gravity, Gemma, our open model family at DeepMind, and I started building models around 2009. So back before it was cool, back before it was the topic of every Silicon Valley house party, and the world has changed and evolved pretty rapidly over the course of the last decade. I think it's also safe to say that the world has evolved and shifted pretty quickly over the course of the last few months in terms of the tools that people reach for most to help them with their work. So when models were first kind of released out into the world, I am seasoned enough to remember the days of like Palm and Palm 2 and kind of the first iterations of the GPT family. Whenever you would ask or invoke the model via an inference call, for it to give you something like a code snippet or an answer, you were limited by the data that it had as part of its pre-training and post-training mixture. So the model gets trained once, it's kind of frozen in time, and then we were all kind of limited by the knowledge that it knew when it was trained, when it was post-trained. The only alternative that you had was to be a brave soul that might be fine-tuning the models later with additional data, so that it might have a little bit more insights into the world. But as you can see, you might ask the model to do a task. It might be kind of a revolutionary task or kind of a frontier level task. And it might recommend a text-only model, even if you were asking it to do something like video processing. After that, we started getting a little bit more creative, like we started introducing things like search grounding. So would you be able to ground in Google search? Could you ground in your own company's documents? Kind of these more persistent sources. Could you invoke things like URL context or tools? And basically just a pleading to the model to please read like RTFM, please read the manual, and to incorporate that into any outputs or any responses that it might give. So instead of recommending, Python 2 code, it might recommend the latest version instead of recommending, code that came from SDK version 1.0. It would recommend code from, the SDK vlatest. Coupled with that, there's yet another problem, which is we now have this kind of spectrum of models that are capable of doing many different things. I'm not sure how many folks here have heard of our Gemma open model family at DeepMind. Okay, excellent. Quite a few folks, especially in the front. We recently released something called Gemma v4, which is a family of models. There's one that's 2 billion parameters in size, including a quantized version or several different quantized versions that are actually small enough to fit on a mobile device. The 4 billion parameter version you can embed with Transformers.js within a browser, so it can be sandboxed with WebAssembly, can operate completely locally and do really interesting things, taking in things like audio or video or images. And then we also have a 12 billion parameter version, which can fit on a laptop, and a 26 billion parameter version, and a 31 billion parameter version, which can fit on a single commodity GPU. But the reason why I mention that is because the 2 billion parameter version and the 4 billion parameter version, which are small enough to fit on local devices and are relatively less compute intensive, they're outperforming Gemini 2.5 Pro, which was our best model, maybe 8 months ago. So to play that back, right, like the model that was kind of like frontier capable 6-8 months ago, can now be replaced with a model that's small enough to fit on your phone or on your laptop and run for $0 with an Apache 2 license. And so now, whenever you start thinking about, all right, I need to do this task, and maybe you're my mom who's like trying to make chicken salad, that task could probably be easily benefited by one of these smaller on-device models than needing to ping out to a pro tier or a frontier level model for every single one of the tasks or subtasks. So all of that to say is that we now have this goal where if a model is building kind of a target plan or architecture, you also want to be able to intelligently route to the right model for each task or each step. And a lot of the time, people are trying to configure that via rules or heuristics. The desire was to be able to do it a little bit more naturally and to have this model routing capability baked in. And for humans, humans are kind of lazy. So if I'm working in anti-gravity or something similar, usually I just default to making calls to the most high-end model, whereas like manually swapping between them gets pretty tedious. So having this baked into something like a skill or a rules file is really, really nice. So enter MCP servers, right? Which was giving models the ability to kind of make calls to different services, to be able to get a little bit more grounded in invoking other APIs or other tools. But this was still very heavy-handed. Like, you needed to be a developer to really understand what an MCP server was, how to set one up, how to configure it, and then also like this process of keeping it up to date was relatively tedious as well. Better than the world that we had before, better than just relying on the model's innate knowledge, but still required a significant amount of effort. The writing markdown files and kind of personalized files is, did anybody ever use Vim or Emacs? Again, kind of dating myself. Okay, cool. So I remember having a Vim RC that was very much in the configuration of the IDE that I was using, or kind of the environment that I was using, making sure that the conventions in the files were correct for my given use case. And I would carry that with me across any computer that I would set up. But it also would take a significant amount of user effort in order to create and to modify and to change over time. And I feel like these Claude Markdown files, these cursor rules files, are also very similar. It's relying on a lot of human, manually created effort as opposed to just doing it naturally. And you have to spot your own kind of automations. You have to spot your own conventions that you would like to use and remember to keep them up to date, which is always a challenge. So I think one of the nice things about skills is that we're kind of moving past the VimRC sort of mindset, where instead of everything as part of a single personalized rules file, you can break them apart into specific tasks. You can create something as human-friendly and readable as a markdown file, which even non-technical folks can kind of look at and understand and help modify and keep up to date. But it's still relying on the human to keep those things up to date. And to keep the markdown consistent, to make sure that it's using the right conventions, and making sure that it's using the latest best practices. And it's, as mentioned, it's independently pulled, it's multiple across projects, and they can be shared across teams. So as an example, at DeepMind, our quantitative data science group for AI Studio and the Gemini APIs, we have a repo internally called Quant Skills. It's everything from creating dashboards to creating report outs to kind of helping you know what data to look at if you're trying to solve particular tasks. This is great in the sense that if you've ever worked with a data science team or a data analyst team, oftentimes whenever folks are pulling data, they might be pulling it from different sources. They might be using different vintages or different ways to kind of cleanse the data or kind of sort of understand the distributions. But if you can make it consistent across your entire team, then it gets a little bit more empirical and a little bit better at following best practices. But I think we can do better. So we've got this sort of situation that exists right now where, just like everything else, humans are still kind of defining the skills. They're still manually updating them, and they still have to like make sure that they're consistently saved across a repo. But I think in the future, what we're going to be seeing is more of a passive observer that kind of listens, observes, watches what you do, spots automation opportunities so you don't have to, and then automatically creates skills or automation steps for you based on the actions that it sees in your browser. And so what this would look like is, you work, you're kind of doing a whole bunch of tasks throughout the day. At the end of the day, maybe your video and the interactions that you have in the DOM, they get sent to a model. And then, Gemini might observe, or whatever your favorite language model that understands video might observe, and then create skills for you. And then it would also be able to help understand, like for this task, it's relatively low in complexity. You can use a local model. Or for this task, it's relatively high in complexity. You might need to use a higher end model. And so, like I said, I am not a super fan of slides. Hopefully this kind of seems like a sort of scenario that y'all might have all been experiencing yourself. And true to any engineering person, what I decided to do was to create a little tool for myself to test out and to see if I could kind of prove this capability might exist or be useful. So I created an extension for Google Chrome. What it does is really simple. So I'll do some tasks in the browser. I will kind of make some modifications. It will capture any clicks or any text inputs that I make in the DOM. And then it will take the video of whatever I just did, all of the DOM clicks, and convert them into skills files, which could then be used for automations if anything looks like it should be automated. So that is the premise. Let's see if it actually works. So this is SkillsForge. It's the little extension that I had made. Hopefully folks in the audience can see it. I apologize for it being a little bit small, but we'll see how it goes. One of the things that I really love doing is I love going on hiking trips, and it's always really, really hard to find the right gear. I end up going to a whole bunch of different websites and attempting to find kind of like the exact hiking boots or the exact kind of mosquito netting that I would need for a hammock. And then I have to do that over and over again. So I would really love to create an automation that would just kind of look and observe whenever something's on sale, find it in my size, and then just to alert me or automatically purchase it. So I'm going to call this task name just like finding hiking gear. I'm going to start the recording. I'm going to go ahead and kind of click around. So clicking on hiking shoes, clicking on the size that I want, clicking on waterproof, as well as kind of a color scheme, which is pretty consistent. I also don't just like REI. I also really, really enjoy Backcountry, which is another website specifically for finding outdoor gear that likes pop-ups or seems to like pop-ups. I'm going to click on hiking again, the color, maybe find the shoe size again. And it looks like we have a few different options. And then I'm going to click Stop and Analyze. And what we should see, yep, there we go. So it's saying that I performed a comparative search for pink waterproof hiking shoes in size 8. It created 2 different skills, so one for REI and then one for Backcountry. And then also gives me the option to kind of save those skills as automations that I could use longer term. You can also see the different DOM actions that I performed in the UI throughout the sort of demo, and what was sent to the model, as well. And the way that it works is, I'm not sure if any folks, I'm going to close this out really quick. I'm not sure if any folks have used AI Studio before, but effectively all that's happening behind the scenes is it's taking a video of whatever I just did in the UI. It's taking a prompt, so a relatively straightforward prompt, and then it's outputting a result. And I'm using Gemini 3.1 Flashlight for this task because Gemini 3.1 Flashlight is very, very capable. It's able to understand video, images, audio, all of the above all at once, but it's also very, very cost effective. And so if I scroll down, you can see the output that it gave for this model. If I hover over the token consumption, you can also see that to analyze kind of this 1 minute of me interacting within the browser and produce skills for it, it ended up being a little bit less than a penny for that minute's worth of work. So if you scale this out, or you imagine scaling it out to, maybe observing whatever you do in your browser throughout the course of a day, spotting automation opportunities, figuring out what you do more than once, and then how you might be able to kind of convert this into something with a little bit more longevity, you would still probably be looking at less than a cup of Starbucks coffee in order to create all of those automations for you for the work that you're doing about the day, as you send in video, as you send in insight from the DOM. One of the other nice things about AI Studio is that if you click this Get Code button, it shows you the code that you would need to replicate whatever you just did within the AI Studio UI, including the model that you invoke, kind of the prompting for it, that you can turn off the prompting, and then any tools that you might have invoked as well, whether it's a call to a vector database or to another service, or sort of grounding with search, grounding with vector search as well. So I really do feel like when we consider the future of work, this is probably what we're going to look at longer term, is like, we've collectively as friends, we've gone through this world of, relying on the model's outputs based on the last training date that they had run. We've gone through adding manually things like tools that the model can call and invoke in order to do its work, including things like code execution. We've gone through MCP servers, which were kind of like definitely a step up, but still relied on a lot of human configuration in order to make them sound. We've relied on skills, which are a better path to the world, which are just markdown files, which are easily customizable, but still require humans to kind of take a look at and persist. And I think the future is that we're just going to be having more of these passive observers that automatically see what you're doing, or automatically kind of spot inefficiencies in your current workflow, and then point you in the direction of where you might want to be in terms of automations regardless, without you having to do a thing, not having to write a single line of code, not having to sort of manually curate them or modify them or update them over time either. So with that, thank you. I think I am right at time, so we might have time for a couple of questions if folks do have questions. But my name is Paige. If this resonated with you, definitely feel free to reach out. And I'm excited to see what y'all build, coupling together large language models as well as all of these other tools that we have at our disposal. So thank you.